I'll tell you what really fascinates me about North Carolina A&T's quarterback situation is the guy at the helm in 2024 was also at the helm during an abysmal 2023. There's some reasons things could be different, though. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs wants to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. We wrap up today's episode with a look at Zaay Green's newest destination. She's headed to Alabama. Prior to that, Clifton McDowell was thought to be a Prairie View A&M Panther, and then he wasn't, and he's at McNeese State. This is a very strange situation, so let's recap one of the stranger stories from the weekend. But we kick it off with North Carolina A&T because they are essentially running it back with Kevin White, but running it back is a little bit different than you would normally hear it be used. Kevin White started multiple games for North Carolina A&T. Excuse me. North Carolina A&T, I would say he played in the majority. He played in 7 games, and I think he started 6 of them. No, actually, I think he started all 7. I think he started all 7 of the games that he played, if I'm not mistaken. So you're looking at a guy who was responsible for North Carolina A&T's offense last year. Not solely responsible, but he was one of the people who does bear some responsibility. When I look at it from that view, it's very difficult for me to understand why you would want to go back and have him be my starting quarterback for another season in a row. But I have to take a step back. I'm already on the outside looking in, but I feel like I need to see more of the outside. So I take a little step back and I listen to how people speak about Kevin White. For me, one of the bigger takeaways is Kevin White is your quarterback. Y'all know how I feel about the quarterback position, and having a little bit of knowledge of who is going to be is a big deal to me with any university. With North Carolina A&T, it's going to be Kevin White, and I didn't really hear frustration about it. I really didn't hear a lot of debate about it. I heard Kevin White is QB1. I heard Kevin White, not from the coach, but I heard some people say Kevin White is QB1. And I've also heard that he took all the reps. So that's, to me, in a spring game, that to me is a dead giveaway that he's going to be their guy. So I will say the fact that there's no complaints is a little bit of a positive to me. But let's see where the negative comes in, because let's just be real. It's not all good. It's not all good. And the reason I'm a little bit concerned is that it's not as if North Carolina A&T had a serviceable passing attack last year. They were terrible. When you look at that offense, their first year in the CAA was bad for the Aggies. It was a bad year for the Aggies. There were some things that you could hang your hat on that they did well, such as stop the pass. But actually executing the pass on their offensive side, no, they did not do that very well. So let's look at where they ranked in the CAA in that first year. Second worst scoring offense altogether. You look at worst total offense when it comes to yardage, the worst in passing yards when it comes to yardage. Like this is a team that did not pass the ball very well. And for a period of time, they didn't pass the ball a lot, right? Like this was a run first offense, but then also the pass was just so abysmal that they ended the season with 4 straight games of over 150 yards. And for some, that may say 150 yards, that's it. Yes, I understand that's a modest total to say, oh, they did this. But A, that should point to you how bad the passing attack was. And then B, it took them 4 weeks. It took them 4 weeks into the season before they totaled 150 passing yards. This was not a good passing offense. And Kevin White was a starter for a lot of it. So now I'm sitting here thinking, why would I want him to be my starting quarterback in 2024? To put some more context on it, Kevin White is the only remaining member of that passing attack from his room. The offensive coordinator is gone, right? So obviously Kevin White's presence on the roster, the fact that he was retained, right? Like, I don't know what the conversations were with everybody else. I don't know why they left. Maybe they felt like they didn't have opportunity. Maybe they felt like we don't want you here, whatever. Kevin White was still here. So I think that does say something for how he's viewed. But I'll give you some of the reasons that I'm not as pessimistic. I'm not rushing to be pessimistic. I'm concerned. I'm hesitant, but I'm not absolutely pessimistic yet. Because though last year was bad, they have a new offensive coordinator. That's the number one reason. The whole scheme is going to be different. And scheme is important because scheme lends itself to certain players, right? I may not execute in a certain podcast format, but right now here with Locked On, I got 3 segments. I got a couple of ad breaks. I got an intro. I got a bumper. I got an outro video. I got all of these things around me. The framework of this network allows me to surge. Maybe that wouldn't have been the case at fill in the blank network, but here they put me in the best positions. That's how you can really look at an offensive scheme. I may look like a terrible host in a certain framework, just like the quarterback play was terrible in that scheme. But when you get in the right framework, the right network, right, you get into the right scheme offensively. Now you can maximize talent, and we'll see if he can do that with Kevin White. That's one reason I'm not as pessimistic. The second reason is Kevin White was a true freshman last year. So with White being a true freshman a year ago, now he's coming in as a sophomore. I'm going to assume that he's taken some of that information that he saw and was like, you know what? I can implement this. I understand where things went wrong. I know how defenses like to play me. I can use my legs in this capacity. Maybe I need to be quicker to take off. Like all of these things come into play, but you need time to build that experience, to have that intelligence on the field. For me, those are the reasons to be optimistic. Those are the hopefuls that we don't know just yet. How does experience change Kevin White? Extra year in the collegiate program. He had just left high school. Things are different. Maybe he needed to get acclimated. What is this new scheme going to do for the offense in general? Maybe more easy passes, maybe getting wide open receivers better. I don't know, right? These are hopefuls that we are unsure about. And now one thing we do know is you still got Kenji Christian. You still got Wesley Graves. You're looking at those 2 players as guys who they had the 6th ranked running attack in the CAA. Maybe they can be able to build on that, and they can be the person who still carries your offense forward, but you are going to need better quarterback play. So I understand being concerned. I'm concerned. Everybody in that quarterback room from 2023 is gone, except for Mr. I don't know why I just forgot to call it brain fart. Mr. White. I wanted to call him Mr. Graves so bad. Everybody's gone except for him. Yes, they brought in talent because the offense was terrible. Of course, you're going to bring in a quarterback to compete, but clearly they didn't beat him out. Clearly, right? And you weren't going to go in with just one quarterback. So Kevin White has proved himself to be the guy, and we'll see what that means in 2024. I'm not going to jump up and down. I hope that means he's gotten better because I didn't watch all of North Carolina A&T, but boy, watching that or hearing about that on a weekly basis, that was a tough break. That was a tough break. But as we keep pushing forward, we're not done with tough breaks. You also have to look at Prairie View A&M, who thought they had themselves a superstar quarterback until Clifton McDowell says, psych, I'm going to McNeese State. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And if you're a small business owner that isn't using LinkedIn, I have a question. Like, legitimately, are you not trying to progress your business to the next level? Because if you go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege, you can pick from one of the 8 billion people who are on LinkedIn. This is not a hyperbole, right? This is no hyperbole, but you're looking at a website that allows small businesses to find their candidate for their job in the first 24 hours at an 86% hit rate. This is what you're passing on by not going to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. I don't understand, but if that's what you want to do, that's your prerogative. I'm just telling you, you can post your job for free. It's no risk, all reward. You're able to see the people who fit your qualifications. If you have somebody that you need to, if you have a void you need to fill in the HR department, LinkedIn is your place to go. If you need a void to be filled in your payroll department, LinkedIn is the place to go. Essentially, go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege and find the right person for your job. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. Check out the Locked on NFL mock draft live on April 17th at 6 p.m. Central Time. Streaming on the Locked on Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel, or you can find it on Amazon Fire TV's app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from the local college football experts. And I'll be tuned in to see who Ross Jackson picks for my New Orleans Saints, right? But this is one of the weirdest things that I've seen this weekend. Clifton McDowell was all but guaranteed to be a PV Panther, and then at the last minute-ish, he just all of a sudden went to McNeese. And this was a strange set of circumstances, right? So Prairie View had a new quarterback. And then the next thing I see Sunday morning, because I'm sitting, not even Sunday morning, Saturday morning, I'm sitting here thinking I'm about to sit here and talk about Prairie View getting a stud quarterback in Clifton McDowell. Then I see Clifton McDowell says he's going to McNeese. And if you have to forgive me if I say this a couple of times, because it's been 24 hours. I've had a moment to sit with this. I mean, I'm happy about it as a Texas Southern alum, but this is just so strange to me. This is just something that doesn't quite make sense because of the words that Bubba McDowell said. So they got 2 McDowells in this situation. You ain't seen 2 McDowells next to each other since coming to America, but they have 2 McDowells with each other, and we just gonna call them Clifton and Bubba. Clifton is the player, the quarterback. Bubba is the coach. All right, Clifton and Bubba. One's actually at PV, and that's Bubba. That being said, Clifton was a major FCS quarterback who had entered the transfer portal from Montana. And with his transferring from Montana, everybody was interested to see where he would go. There was some ideas that because of the success that he had at Montana, both as a team and as an individual, maybe he could move up to the FBS ranks. He ended up staying on the FCS ranks. And when he showed up at Prairie View A&M's spring practice, everybody said, "Oh, what's this guy doing here? Clifton McDowell, the Montana quarterback, he's at PV. This would be a big get for them." And then it turned from this would be a big get for them to this was a big get for them. I don't know the exact order of events because I was doing stuff on Saturday, or maybe it was Friday. I think it was Friday. But I was doing stuff that day, and I ended up catching it a couple of hours into the hype, right? So I don't know if they just got excited by his appearance, or if the words that Bubba said actually got them to feel like he was coming to PV. Now, what Coach Bubba said was that we're going to get him in the fold. But if you want an exact quote, let's get an exact quote. He said, Bubba McDowell said, "Geez, Clifton looks very solid. We will get him in here by June, enroll him, and work with all the quarterbacks." That's an exact quote. This is an exact quote from him. Even if you want to say we're going to get him in the fold, all of these things sound like we have him. All of these things sounded like a commitment, right? All of these things, it's like what was being said was everything except for I'm committed to Prairie View A&M. With the Clifton McDowell situation, his appearance, whatever. People show up at practices all the time. And you know what? Fans get excited about these things all the time. But this felt different. And I think it's because they have Bubba on record saying that they're going to get Clifton in the fold. They're going to have him work with the quarterbacks. They're going to enroll him in June. And yes, all of these things could be hypothetical. All of these things could be things that Coach Bubba wants to do. But there's a certain level of confidence when you come and you tell a reporter that that's what's going to happen. This sounds like he thought he had the guy. And I don't blame him because I don't know what the conversations were. But I want to know, what were the conversations between Bubba McDowell and Clifton McDowell prior to Bubba going out there and saying, we're going to get Clifton in the fold, enrolled him by June? I want to know what happened before that and then what happened after that. Because about 24 hours later, Clifton McDowell said, I'm going to McNeese. Somebody want to explain that one to me. Somebody want to explain how Clifton McDowell was being spoken about as if he would already sign his national letter of intent with Prairie View A&M, and just a mere day later, he's committing to McNeese. Did Bubba overplay his hand? Did Bubba misunderstand? What's going on here? Because you don't go from Bubba McDowell telling the reporter, right? He don't go from telling Kyle T. Mosley that we're going to get him in the fold. He looks solid. We're going to get him in here by June. He's laying out this is the best way to put it. This whole Clifton McDowell situation is strange to me because Bubba McDowell came out and laid out the blueprint of how they're going to handle Clifton McDowell. Now, I understand that it's always good to have a plan, but that's not something that you typically see a coach share with a reporter. This is not something that you typically see go on record. Not at this stage in the game. Maybe if you're talking about a high school recruit who we've had for a year or maybe a couple of months, but this is a guy who we didn't even know was going to show up at your practice. We didn't even know was on the radar of Prairie View A&M. We see him, and now you're telling us that you already have a plan for him. That sounds like a signed his national letter of intent, but it's not. So when he commits to McNeese State, it seems to me that Bubba McDowell may have overplayed his hand. We're not going to care about this in the long run. I can tell because I feel like people aren't already holding that against him. But to me, that's a tad bit strange. To me, that was a tad bit out of character. And I've seen Bubba McDowell, good guy, seems calculated from a step back perspective. There's something that we don't know and we won't know. But I just want to tell you, this is the strangest story that I saw over the weekend. Now, as we push forward, I want to look at Zaay Green because she is leaving and she is going to Alabama, the University of Alabama, and not Alabama A&M. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, unfortunately, and I knew this was going to be the case, my Pelicans are in the play-in game. I could take responsibility for what they did yesterday afternoon, I should say. But instead, I'm going to deflect and say that the Sacramento Queens should not have lost that game to the Suns at the end of last week in the weekdays. That's what I'm going to say, because when they lost that game, I already knew what it was going to be. I knew Minnesota was going to lose to Phoenix, and they did. They laid an egg. And now we're sitting here in the play-in game. You have us versus the Lakers. You have the Sacramento Queens against the Warriors. What you taking? Playing games start on Tuesday. They go to Wednesday. Then after that, we'll start with the first round. The NBA playoffs are here, and they're the best thing for you to make a little bit of money on. So go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $150 back in bonus bets when you put down your first bet. Ain't even got to win it. So there's no such thing as losing when you go to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Zaay Green is transferring to Alabama. And if you're sitting here waiting for me to add an A&M on the end, you can continue to wait because it's not happening. Zaay Green is now moving on to the University of Alabama. And you know what? when Dawn Thornton left UAPB for Alabama A&M, I think it was easy to speculate what's going to happen with Zaay Green. And it didn't necessarily have to be that she would follow Dawn Thornton. It's what I thought was going to be the case, but I was just very doubtful that she would stay at UAPB without Dawn Thornton. And that actually became the truth, right? And I don't think that makes me any genius. And if she would have followed Dawn Thornton, that wouldn't have made me a genius. This was the unexpected move. Because when Zaay Green did enter the portal, I think a lot of people said, all right, she's going to Alabama A&M. That just felt like the move. It felt like either stay where you are or follow Coach Thornton. But then she put out her speech, or her, the same speech that people put out, but she had a little bit of twist to it. Because she says she's not following Dawn Thornton to Alabama A&M. I thought that was interesting because I had never seen anybody do that. I'd never seen somebody say, I'm not doing this. When they announce that they're leaving, it's thank you for the time. I have this amount of time left in my eligibility. Thank God. Thank these coaches for recruiting me. Thank the nation, right? The fan base, right? Like fill in the blank nation. Like just those are the typical things. But she said, I'm not going to Alabama A&M because of circumstances throughout the year. I don't know what that is. I don't think it's a personal issue with Dawn Thornton, because if that was the case, then she just would have left UAPB immediately after the season. A lot of other people did it. So that would have been what she did if there was a personal problem with Dawn Thornton. And I don't believe that that's what happened. I don't know what those circumstances are. This is not a gossip show, so I'm not going to try to speculate on that. I know I've speculated before, but those were way more on sport deals. This isn't that, so I'm not going to. But that was an interesting message. It was one that caught me off guard because I just never seen anybody do that before. Now, I'll say this, though. If I was Zaay Green, I probably would have transferred over to Alabama as well, because the weekend that she came to the University of Alabama, the weekend that she spent in Tuscaloosa, it was a preview type weekend, except all sports centric, right? So if you're listening to the show, you probably either are on the way to an HBCU, you've been to an HBCU, maybe currently at an HBCU, maybe your kid is at an HBCU, right? Like more, I would say probably 95% of my listeners and viewers fall in that category or in those categories. So we know a little something about preview day when campus looks as best as it could. Everybody's outside. Everybody's festive, right? They got all the people out there that you want to see. You know what I mean? For me, it was like, wow, this ain't about me right now. Maybe another time. But I was about to tell you about my experience in going to Texas Southern in their preview day. But you know what? I'm going to take a step back and focus on Zaay Green, because hers wasn't even the typical preview day. But just imagine what that's like, but then all sports centric. You had softball. They were going against the number one team in the nation. You had baseball, a top 25 matchup. Then you had spring football having their spring game. This is an organic spring preview day, honestly. Like you have these during the week. And it wouldn't have shocked me if they actually had their preview weekend that week, because you do have them in the spring just like you have them in the fall. This allowed Zaay Green to see everything, and I would have transferred. She was able to see all of the festivities, all of the coaches. She was able to see the biggest sport. She was able to see an additional men's sport and how that's treated. One that's not, it doesn't compare up to football, but it's another sport. And you have another women's sport. So you got to see three different cultures, essentially, right? You got to see three different fan bases and how they were. And they were great games. This wasn't an accident, but it wasn't completely planned. You couldn't know that both of those teams were going to be top 25. You couldn't have known that you were going to face the number one team in the nation. You couldn't know that you were going to have your spring game, but you won all of those. You won the spring game technically because you can't lose it. You beat the number one team in the nation on that day. You beat the baseball team on that day in the top 25 matchup. This was everything for them. And now Zaay Green's returning not only to the Power 5 level, but then also to the SEC level, because that's where she started her career. Before coming to UAPB for a season or 2 seasons due to injury, and then once she played, you had her at Tennessee for 2 seasons. She was on an all-freshman team in the SEC. The next year, she had got injured 2 games into the season. She moves over to Texas A&M, doesn't play that much. Now she moves to UAPB. So this is her 3rd Power 5 and 3rd SEC school. I'll be very interested to see what she does. I'll be watching. I don't know how much Alabama I'm going to catch, but I'll probably flip over every now and then just to see what she did. I did the same thing with Bashul Tootin. I did the same thing with BJ Davis. So I do sometimes go and just see what's going on with these guys. You know, I did the same thing with I'm too young to be feeling this like old forgetfulness. But Elijah Hawkins, there we go. I did the same thing with Elijah Hawkins when he left Howard and he went to Minnesota and went absolutely dumb with the facilitation. But yeah, anyway, on tomorrow's episode, we'll be looking at HBCU gymnastics, specifically Morgan Price and what she was able to do in another historic moment. So you don't want to miss that, as well as recapping some of the spring games from this past weekend. So till tomorrow, till next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.